Hey everyone, welcome back to God Stories. This is the 7th episode, a little bit different episode. I got my good buddy Andrew, he's back, because I'm going to be giving my testimony and he's going to be asking me the questions. I'll just do the general introduction as I ask them before, as I ask all my guests. But my name is Cole.Lankford, and I'm 24 years old. I'm an electrical engineer with Alabama Power. I just graduated UAB, and I'm an associate utility pastor at my church at Oasis of Praise, which is just basically kind of like an intern, and I just, do what they tell me, which is, still fun, but, that's a little bit about me. So I'll turn it over to Andrew as he is the interviewer for this process.
Yeah, before we get into questions, I do want to say, man, I'm excited to hear some more of your story. Me and Cole, last couple of years, we've both been interning at the church together, and I've learned a lot from him. He's learned a lot from me, and we've just grown together, and I've grown to really love this man right here. So I'm excited to get into his story, maybe learn a little bit from it as well. I guess, with the first question is you usually get into it. Just kind of describe your life before Jesus and before you made that decision, to live for him. What did your life look like?
So a typical, Bible Belt kind of like family, mom and dad raised me in church. Luckily, they were able to stay together, luckily, as some kids don't have both father and mother figure in their life, and luckily my parents had a great marriage and raised me up in church. And so I went to church every single day, was at the church basically every time it was open, Sunday, Wednesdays, and they have like the special events for kids and kids night outs and all that stuff at my old church. And I'll go there and just spend all the time I could at church and go to church camps and do all this stuff. And I was just, trying to, just live as my parents wanted me to, and kind of just living by their faith for a little bit. And then, once high school started, middle school kind of just coasted through. Once high school kind of started, I kind of just, started seeing what was, kind of like my purpose in life. Because, I was in church and, I kind of knew about this, whole Jesus guy. And, but just like I said, kind of living through my parents' faith for a while. And once I turned 15, 16, I started trying to get involved a little bit more at the church, and, just trying to, again, just keep going. And, like, people say they have, like, a, quote, boring testimony. And up until about, 17, 18 years old, I kind of had that, boring testimony where, when I put air quotes around it, because, I think the boring testimony is just a great way to say you were faithful to God through all those times. And, thank God for my parents who kept me that way. Like I said, and so once I turned, 17, it's kind of when I had, like, I wouldn't say, like, people say, like, midlife crisis, but not really. I just had an identity crisis because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was my senior year, and I was thinking about going into engineering, which I eventually did, but, like, I didn't really know if that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so for that year of senior year in high school, I was like, all right, God, if you're, someone I'm going to follow and someone I've heard about, I need to, like, get into my relationship more and more with you. So 17 years old, went full on out, turned 18 in December of that year, and was like, all right, I'm committing myself to you. And that's when, I started just trying to live a life that was for God. And that's when, at 18, he called me to preach. He said preach, and I don't know what that's going to look like in the future, but I've been thankful for the opportunities he's given me so far at my old church and here now. But before that, I was just at an identity crisis, and he showed me through his faithfulness what my purpose here on this earth was, and it was to preach. And I've stayed away from all the things people they say in high school. I've never drank, I've never smoked. I had to fix my language a little bit because I cursed for about 2 years, but I've stopped all that. So I'm kind of like that what they call like the goody Christian. But yeah, up until about 18 is when is what my life looked like. Just kind of like just living the best way I could, but not really fully selling out to Jesus. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a very similar story. And so I think a lot of times people like us struggle with not feeling like we don't have a testimony, you
Yeah.
know. But I know there's still things Jesus has done in your life and things He's done for you. And so I want to talk about a little bit of, I guess, that transition from where you were, you know, you weren't living a sinful worldly life, but you still were having that identity crisis. And what that transition looked like, what changed in your life to get you from there to where you are now, you know, living for Jesus and confident in that.
Yeah, it took a minute because I'm a people pleaser. I like people being okay. I don't like conflict for the most part. Like if there's times where I have to face it and get uncomfortable, but if most likely I would like to try to please everybody. And then, you know, coming to know that now that you can't please everybody. And so there's some times where you're going to have to step on some toes, and there's some times where, you know, a hug is not going to be the best solution for something. And so really when I sold out to Jesus is when he was like, you know, you're going to have to not care about what people have to say about you. And it's really hard sometimes because, you know, I value what people think about me, because I want people to see my life as a Jesus-filled lifestyle, and I want them to see me as, you know, the guy who is nice, the guy who is always there, the guy who always shows up. And like I always say this, and like when people say, you know, somebody was like, don't swim across an ocean if somebody wouldn't cross a puddle for you. But to me, that's not my mentality. I'm always gonna, even if you don't care, I'm still gonna be there for you because, you know, that's what Jesus is there for me. And so I always want to show people that I'm there for them. But my lifestyle change was really when he said, you know, hey, this is what you need to do, and this is what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to preach. I'm gonna give you the words to speak. You've always felt like you've had something to say about me, and him being when I reference me, that's Jesus when Jesus speaking to me, and he's like, I'm going to give you the ability to preach, and I want you just to fully trust in me. But that as soon as I got that call, that's when you know the problem started, and so we'll get into that in a little bit later. So.
Well, we'll get into that right now. Okay. The next question with that would be, you know, once you got into that place where you knew you were living for Christ, you were committed to it, you know, what were some of the issues, because we all have them, even after we're saved, you know, life's not just perfect after that. And so what were some of the struggles or issues you had that Jesus had to show you that you had to rely on Him?
Yeah.
You know?
Two really big ones. Two really, really big ones. Number one, was I had an addiction to pornography for 4.5 to 5 years. It started a little bit after I got called at 18. You know, I was exposed to a little bit before that, you know, in my early age, like 15, 16, 17, but never really like fully started like into the addiction part of it. Like it would be like here and there, but like it wouldn't be like as constant as it was for the 4.5 years where I was just bound by it. And so for 4.5 years, man, it was just a battle because I had the wherewithal to know that every time somebody asked me about a relationship, why I haven't, you know, been in a relationship, I would always say, you know, hey, I'm just not ready for it. I don't see the point of it right now. Knowing that I was struggling with a pornography addiction because, one, you know, I didn't want to get into a relationship based on that, and then have to, because I'm basically am cheating on the person that I'm with if I'm watching that. And maybe not be with an actual person, but, you know, that an act of itself is cheating in my eyes. And then number two, it was just, you know, when I looked around me when I was 18, you know, I saw everybody that I saw was in a relationship. My sister was in a relationship. My brother was in a relationship. All my friends mostly were in a relationship. I saw like the good marriage that my parents had, and, you know, something that I just wanted to experience. I wanted to experience love in a way that I've never experienced it in the physical and I really hadn't experienced the true love of Jesus until I got out of it, because for 4 years, it was just, kind of a thing that I did because when I was lonely, it's just something that I just fell back into. Like it says, I'm lonely, I would just watch porn, and it was awful. And then one time I started I went on a date with a girl in the middle of it, and because I thought I was, I could, manage it, and maybe if I started dating somebody, it would go away. But then it just got worse at the end of 2021, like really, really bad. And God told me, He was like, okay, you can tell somebody about it, and we'll get through this. But He says if you don't tell somebody about it and you do fall back into it, the only person that is going to make you free of this is if you tell your dad. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. And so I didn't tell anybody. I fell back into it, and God's like, okay. He says, if you want to get over it, you have to tell your dad about it. And so in January of 2022, I stopped for about 2.5 weeks, and I knew if I didn't tell anybody that, I would just fall back into it. And I told my dad, and I thought it was going to be horrible. He was going to be mad at me. He was going to say, okay, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're grounded and all that stuff, even at 22, but still. But he looked at me and he told me, he was like, I love you, and you're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. And, him saying that to me was kind of like, Jesus through him as well. He says, hey, I love you, and, we're going to get through this together. And even though it didn't stop immediately, and I still, had not the addiction part of it, but like I would fall back into it periodically for the next 4 to 5 to 6 months, and then again, then I stopped, and it's just been keeping myself disciplined over the past 2 years to make sure that when I have those thoughts, not to act on it, and I know how to defend myself against it. And that's really when I had to rely on Jesus and say, hey, this is something I don't want to be bound to anymore. And that's what I went through. And then the second part, the second one, I would say, was when I got out of my first ever relationship back in September of 2023. I finally, at the end of 2022, I finally got my first girlfriend, and it was great, and I thought this was it. I thought I was going to marry her. I thought I was going to be with her for the rest of my life. We were going to build something together, and in reality, that the relationship honestly wasn't the best because of multiple things. I wasn't the man that I was supposed to be. I wasn't the leader I was supposed to be in the relationship. And really, that was the ultimate reason, because I was relying on her for my happiness more than I was relying on God. So I wasn't being the person I was supposed to be. And in July of last year, God told me that I had to end the relationship. And I want to preference this. I don't really like using God told me to as a way to break up with somebody, because I think that's kind of a cop out. But God audibly said, hey, if you want to get back to where you need to be with me, you can't be with her. And the unfortunate part is that I didn't want to do it because I loved her, and I thought this was the relationship that I always had dreamed of, and that I always longed for, was there. And he says you can't. He's like, this is not a relationship that you're supposed to be in. And so I prolonged it for 2 months. I'd said no for 2 months, and then finally God said, you either going to have to hurt my feelings or you're going to have to hurt hers. And eventually, and I had to listen to God at that point, because I couldn't go running far enough, because I didn't want it to end to where something bad happened and we would hate each other for the rest of our lives and have regrets based on that. And so in September I ended the relationship, and I felt at peace about it, and I thought it was okay. Up until January of this year, where loneliness, brokenness, and just depression just really set in. And man, probably the darkest time of my life, because I had a lot on my mind, because I never thought never experienced the love of Jesus fully. I never understood relying on him more than relying on anybody else. And that's what I had to realize. And like, because, you want something so bad, and then when God says no, you're just like, man, like, why? And so, and it's tough, to see yourself and hate yourself, because you're just lonely and depressed. And so wake up every morning and just to say, I don't want to be here anymore. And, I thought the best solution for me was to not be here anymore. And then, I thought the solution was not to be here anymore. And I thought about it for, like, when I say I thought about it, I never contemplated actually, like, carrying out a plan or doing something like that. But the thoughts were like, what's the purpose of being here anymore if I'm just so lonely and broken and, nobody's ever going to love me. And God really showed me one night in my room. He's like, man, I'm right here. He says, I've always been right here. I'm always going to be here for you. He says, the only thing you've been looking for is love in all the wrong places, and the only love that you're looking for is the only thing that I can provide that can satisfy you fully. Not in a person, not in the past relationship you had, not in the way you think love is, in a physical form, and us as humans think of love. He says, the purest form that's never going to fail and always going to be with you by your side. And so God had to show me through show me through it the porn addiction, what a relationship needs to look like, and out of lust, but then outside of going through a relationship and saying, hey, you can't rely on somebody for your happiness, because only true joy and true peace comes from me. And so those are the two situations that he really showed me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I guess with that, going through those things, what is some advice to someone else that's going through something similar, or really any struggle,
yeah,
that you would give that helped you get through that, and that Jesus, taught you through that?
Two things. Make sure you talk to somebody. Not only talking to God every single day for your peace, but also in a sense of having somebody to talk to, because, as I said before, this person, this brother sitting next to me is somebody I confided in for those 2 weeks where I was in a really bad spot. And thank God for Andrew, because he noticed something that nobody probably else noticed besides my cousin. Andrew was preaching one Wednesday, and he asked how did I do, because I was in there supposed to be listening to him, but for an hour and a half I couldn't focus, because for the last 2 weeks I just couldn't focus on anything besides what's the point of being here. And I went up to him, and he was like, hey man, how did I do? And he said, dude, honestly, I didn't listen. He says, I'm just not in a place where I need to be right now. And I remember Andrew looking at me, and he was like, took a step back, and he said, oh, okay. And he knew in his mind, he says, there's something wrong. Like, there's something really wrong here. And he checked on me, and love him for it. He checked on me, so did my cousin, and made sure that I was okay, and really kept me going. You got to find somebody to talk to. Because if you don't, you're just gonna dwell on the things that they're not good about yourself, and there are gonna be people who are encouraging you and saying, hey, we need you here. And there are people who know you and who have a purpose for the things that you're supposed to be doing. And the second thing I would tell people to do is look for the good things in life, because that's what I had to do to get out of my depression. if you're depressed or you have anxious or you worry and you just, feel like everything's gone to crap, my advice to you is look for one good thing in every single day. And I know it's going to be hard, and I know that's kind of the thing you probably don't want to hear, but you have to look for one good thing in every single day, because there is good in every single day. Even though the main problem may not be fixed, but you could like look up at every single day. You're like, hey, I got to work on time, even though that may you may not like your job, but like, hey, I got to work on time, or hey, I have food on my table, I have a great lunch, I'm really excited for lunch, or hey, I have this really great friend who I could just get to see, in the next Monday or Tuesday or just whenever it is. Look for the good in every single day, and that's where you'll find Jesus, because He's always in the good. He's in the pain, and he's in the bad too. But it's hard to see it when you're focused on yourself and not focused on the good around you, and you can get into a bad spot if you're not focused really on the things. If you're just focused on the problems, you're just gonna get into a deeper hole. So those are the two things I would say is, find somebody to talk to and to make sure that they're encouraging you. And then number two is to make sure just to try to find the good in every single day, because if you can't, then the bad is just going to get more and more worse, and the problems you see are just going to become more overwhelming than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I would say, with that, I completely agree. And a lot of times we just spiral when we're in that place, and it's just, you get in an endless cycle of one thing after the next, and it adds on to each other, and you can break out of that cycle just by changing your mindset.
Yeah.
And saying, not trying to fight all the negativity, but like, what, that's there, but let's look at what's positive in my life.
Yeah.
And Jesus will just start pulling it out of you,
Yeah.
and then you'll start a new cycle of positivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, that can be very powerful.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. But man, thank you for your story and revisiting that and talking about it. I've learned a lot from your story, and I hope someone else can get something out of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. We got before we got today.
Yeah.
If you want to close this out.
Yeah. Thanks guys for watching. I really hope you get something out of my testimony. Because it's something. It's the reason why I started this channel. Is to for people to get a little bit vulnerable and a little bit just to tell about what God's done in their life. And for me, I'm always going to be an open book. I'm always going to tell you everything how it is and like it is, because I want somebody that's going through the same thing that I've gone through to experience the love of Jesus. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this. Make sure to watch all of our previous videos, and we will see you guys in the next one.